Thank you for joining us and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Westerville Board of Education. We've already been in executive session, so the meeting has been called to order. There will be 2 times this evening for public comments. The first needs to pertain to items of action on our agenda, and the second does not. And with that, will you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Up first, district highlights and recognitions. We do not have any. 5.01, discussion and approval of the minutes of the Board of Education meeting on June 29th, July 6th, and July 27th. Do we have any comments, questions? Okay, Bart, let's consider them approved. Reports, we have none. Public comments, we have none, which takes us to 8.01. Audit Committee looking for members, and Bart's going to talk to us about that.
Madam President, members of the board, this is just for informational purposes. We have an audit committee that we put together every year. In the past, we had approved our audit committee to have the members be assigned in January. That's kind of a long period. People don't really know what they're going to be doing in December. So coming up later on, you're going to see first reading that we're trying to see if the board will approve us to have the audit committee in place. I think it's before October 31st. So tonight really is just let people know that we're going to have a link on the website if you're interested in being on the audit committee. In the past, we've tried to be fairly consistent with members. We've tried to keep them on at least 3 times as long as they're interested in being on and I'm interested in having them continue to be on. We try to use them for 3 years. We currently have a couple members that this would be their 3rd year, which I would like to keep on, and one was new last year. So, and he's agreed to stay on as well. So I really have 3 of the 5. I need 2 more members. So we're going to have a link on the website. I think it's either, if it's not up today, it will be tomorrow. Then they go on. I think you just basically fill out sort of like an application, your qualifications. We really want somebody that has audit experience, that understands how to read the audit, or who have written audits or participated, somebody that has audit experience so that it's, they at least have an idea what's going on. So that's on the website from now on. You guys are going to do the first reading tonight to change the board policy. So I'd like to bring this back at the next board meeting when you guys do the second reading and approval. I'll try to have the list of names at that same time so we can have them on board. We do have the auditors in our office now. Typically, we have these audit reports usually in December at some point. Last year was a little delayed. It's usually in December at some point. So anyway, this is just informational to let people know we're looking for 2 people who might want to be on the audit committee. They're 1-year terms unless it works out to where we keep them longer.
Do we send anything out to email to try to get people?
I think Greg was going to do a blast to everybody that we have that has
email,
email, some kind of email blast, all of the people that are associated with the schools to let people know what we're doing. Okay. We don't put it in the paper per se, but we do a big blast to make sure.
Good.
That's all I got.
Okay. Thank you, Bart. Up next, personnel consent agenda and 9.01 through 9.11. And may I have a motion for this, please?
So moved.
Second.
And Lori's going to join us.
Good evening, President Davidson, members of the board. Tonight's consent agenda contains 11 sections. We have 2 classified resignations in 9.01, 9.02, 3 teacher resignations, and 1 supplemental contract. 9.03, 1 leave of absence of a teacher. 9.04, 2 classified staff change of assignments, and 5 temporary moves. These are mostly to support the opening of schools. 9.05, 2 changes of assignment for teachers. 9.06, we have one-time payment for 3 classified maintenance coaches for this upcoming school year. 9.07, a one-time payment for a kindergarten teacher. 9.08, contractual status change for 5 classified staff and one adjustment to correct the effective date of a previously approved item. 9.09, contractual status change for one teacher who's going from part-time to full-time, and for one outside supplemental staff member. 9.10, we have employment of 25 classified staff and 5 substitutes, and 9.11, employment of 11 teachers, 1 psychologist intern, 1 nurse, extended days, which is actually from last year. She was hired mid-year and so was not approved previously for the extended time. Various supplementals, most of these are our fall coaches, and 1 adjustment to a supplemental. This time, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
I just have one question on 9.07, and it's just for clarification, I guess. The particular kindergarten teacher that's spending 1 hour, is that for just a one-time, one day, or is that going to be entire year? That's what I couldn't decipher here. It's just a one
President
day.
Davidson, Dr. French, this is a one-time,
One day.
one day. She's
Okay.
split between 2 buildings, so she has 1
Just
hour
that one day.
on August 11th.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Dr. French,
Yes,
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. We're good. Thank you, Lori. Appreciate it. Up next, the final reading for policy 8400, school safety. And since this is the, do you want to, you stood up, so I was
Neither.
unsure.
we need a.
I've received no
yeah, okay.
feedback.
Okay, yeah. I'm sorry, I missed that. We need a motion first, and then I didn't hear what you said. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Third.
And up here to present is Deb Meisner.
President Davidson, on this item on your agenda, I've received no feedback to
Okay,
point me in any other direction other than what's been recommended.
okay, thank you. Bart?
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Dr. French,
Yes,
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. Wow, this is going quick. Okay, 11.01, we have none, which takes us to new business. First reading for policy for the EpiPen injectors. This is 12.01, and I know Debbie Meisner is going to join us again and talk to us about this.
Good evening, President Davidson, members of the board. I'm presenting new policy 5330.02, procurement and use of epinephrine auto-injectors in emergency situations as a first reading for your consideration. House Bill 296, which was legislation passed back in November of 2013, which went into effect April of 2014, allows, but does not require, school districts to obtain epinephrine auto-injectors, also known as EpiPens, and administer them in emergency situations. The legislation is intended to protect children who might have first allergic reaction at school. According to the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, 25% of first-time reactions occur at school. A district committee researched and debated this topic and are recommending to the board that Westerville become a district to stock generic epinephrine. If the board desires to approve this direction, a district committee would reconvene to develop the administrative guidelines. Grant money may be available to the district. In the absence of grant money, the cost to implement would be approximately $15,000 a year. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
do you anticipate grant money for a period of time, or do you have any idea?
I anticipate grant money for a period of time.
10 years? You don't know.
I have no idea how long that opportunity may continue.
Thank you.
I don't have a lot of knowledge about EpiPens, just in general. What stands out to me is that 25% of first reactions tend to occur at schools, correct?
Correct.
And at this point, $15,000 per year. And in the policy that I'm reading, it talks about how many at each building and so on. And And I think we are in a process of talking through right now, trying to figure out where they will be, like physically stored and who is trained on them and all of that, right?
That's correct.
And again, this is outside my really knowledge base, but it does concern me that 1 out of 4 could have some kind of reaction and we might not be prepared. Now, perhaps the parent has already provided for some kids, some families perhaps not. But if a 1 out of 4 is this surprise, the family is not prepared for that. And so I guess I'm just wanting to hear feedback, thoughts, ideas, because of it seems to me to be a pretty significant perhaps benefit for not as high a cost as something happening pretty tragically to a child. The only people that I know of that I've talked to about this, these reactions can happen very quickly and can go downhill very quickly. So, very conscious of our expenditures and all of that, but I just really invite feedback and questions and thoughts. I just don't. I don't have that knowledge. I'm just looking at it from the perspective of preparedness against something that could be pretty serious. I wish there was a question in there, but I don't know that there
It
was.
may be helpful if you share a little bit about who was on the committee that reviewed the policy, and because we had the option, the board has the option to do this or not do this. And so the committee and the membership might be helpful to understand where our information came that suggested us, yeah, this is worth the 15,000 against the odds. So could we, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Deb, but is that?
Sure, no problem. Committee membership included parents of students with life-threatening allergies, parents of students with no known life-threatening allergies, school nurses, representatives for the WEA, representatives from administration. We had folks from our purchasing department there, representatives from WESA, representatives from food service. It was a pretty nice cross-section of individuals who may have come to the table with preconceived ideas already on where their position was, but it was a good, healthy debate on talking about everything, as far as the logistics of how this might occur, even though that conversation should really occur later after the board gives us either a blessing to continue in this direction or not. And we look forward to continuing to have healthy debate on this conversation. At current, prior to this legislation, a school nurse would be put in a awkward position. Their license would not allow them to administer epinephrine unless it was specifically prescribed for a student. So the intended purpose behind this legislation, if the school district chooses to stock epinephrine, would allow a school nurse to make a decision that wouldn't put a decision between possibly jeopardizing their license and saving the life of a child.
I know you're bringing, I'm sorry. And I know you're bringing this forward, first reading, and let's go through it, and eventually to vote affirmatively would be the desire of the team, of the group. Was there a pretty good, at the end of this time, was there a pretty good consensus on, let's bring this forward? Do we feel this is right? Parents with, parents without, teachers on board, staff, everybody feeling like that's, yes, we think this is the direction to go.
I know of people who went to the meeting with a preconceived idea of where they thought they were, who had had pretty healthy conversations on this topic, whose opinions, as a course of the conversation, were moved and changed, and to the best of my knowledge, everyone did land on consensus.
Thank you. Sorry.
No. Do you have anything, Nancy?
In general, I am very much in favor of this. I think it's a life-saving policy, and it's a life-saving thing that we ought to be prepared to do. And if we're going to be prepared to do it, then we have to have the guidelines laid out so that we're doing it correctly. I have two itsy-bitsy teeny little wording changes that I would like to ask you to consider. The first one is in line 2, when it says the superintendent shall adopt a policy and procedures. We're adopting the policy. The superintendent is adopting the procedures. That's one. The second, sorry, John. The second is in the first paragraph below the list. The way that it reads now, when the sentence that starts in procuring EpiPens, the board will accept donations and so forth, the way that it reads now, the argument can be made from a policy perspective that the only way that we can get EpiPens is if somebody gives them to us. And I would suggest either in addition to district funds as a possible funding source, or some phrase placed in there just so that it doesn't look as though we are insisting that all EpiPens have to be donated to us.
Those are two excellent call-outs. I chose to go originally with the Neola language. I had the same reservations myself. They had rationale to support why they moved in that direction, but I concur with your suggestion.
Neola does a nice job, but Neola isn't us.
I know, as Rick mentioned, this is just first reading, and I understand that. I think as we move to second reading and closure on the discussion and get into operationalization and implementation, my request would be that we're very strategic about it. It looks like, a standard EpiPen shelf life is about 2 years. Well, it's 1 year generally from time of receipt. However, if it's brand new, it can extend out to 2 years. So my ask is that we're good at figuring out how to stage this so any expense is spread over 2 calendar years if we can, right? So that it's being managed centrally. It's not just we can do this now and everybody's off kind of doing their own thing. I think the standardization from an operations standpoint is something that we need to kind of bake into the implementation once we get there. It's just my request, so.
It might be a good idea, even though the policy appropriately assigns the creation of those guidelines to the superintendent and his team. It would be helpful if we saw those after they were done so that we are able to answer questions and are able to, kind of give our thoughts, which we always do, but just so that we know what that is.
So I have lots to fill in. I have a child who has severe allergies and have had to use an EpiPen, and it is seconds, minute. So lots of questions for me. I am a little concerned this will have a false sense of security because if the more you dig into this, even though it's 25% of the time these reactions happen in school, it's in elementary school, 6 through 12-year-olds have it, and it's in a classroom. So it's not in the lunchroom, it's not on the playground. So that says to me, these are our parties probably, which would mean a teacher would have to be aware of what's going on, run down the stairs, or wherever they're at, run down the hall, get the EpiPen. If it's truly needing that, it's got to be there in the room. Honestly, if you talk to a pediatrician, that's what they would say. So I'm very concerned that it's not the money part, it's the false sense of security, as well as parents that know their child needs an EpiPen, then they won't report it because they are $400 for a set of 2. Also, when you do have a reaction, a lot of times you need not just 1, but 2. So for me, it's location and training. And again, this would be something that if we are going to invest in this, and Carol, you're going to hate me, but really one should be in every classroom. That's where they should be. And they should be not kept in the office locked up, which I know that's what guidelines say, they should be in a cafeteria and on the playground for bee stings and whatever. And then, so we started talking about this, what about on the bus then? So this is just a whole nother, you know, do we hold bus drivers responsible for them? I think there's a large conversation. Maybe adopting this makes us feel good, but it concerns me a little bit. And I mean, if it's, you know, saving a kid's life and the small amount of money, I am all for it. I'm not saying that, but I'm concerned with some of this.
One of the things-
Let
oh,
me
sorry.
interject. Did you say, Carol, I'm going to hit you?
Yeah, because, I mean,
No,
really.
no.
Okay.
I agree with you. It does have to be where it's accessible very quickly. I know kids have quick reactions. And in most cases, those children know that, you know, in some cases,
Well-
but not every. But if they know it, they should certainly be with them.
Okay, so here's the thing. When my son had a reaction, he ate a French fry, one bite of a fry that was fried in oil that had fish in it.
Yep.
So who would have thought that? I mean, so when they have shrimp poppers at school,
Yep.
it scares me that a kid would somehow touch it and touch him. And so he carries an EpiPen, but could he give it to himself, you know, if he was really having a reaction? Because the last one he had, there's no way. I mean, there's so much more to it.
Yeah.
So,
But a lot of that goes into the training and the regulations. But one of the questions that I have, and it popped into my mind, but I didn't say anything, but you're making it much clearer for me, where it says each building principal shall endeavor to maintain at least 2 EpiPens. My concern at the time, and I know it says at least, I didn't think that was enough.
I mean, if we're going to do it, we have to go all the way, is my thought. I mean, really,
How do we know what's enough?
well,
We don't.
every
That's
teacher
the
would
thing.
need,
We don't.
it,
I think that what the policy does, though, it sets the parameter, and then the team has to decide how that's going to play out. I do think you're right. I think that they need to be accessible, however that's decided to be. My concern is, you know, from the policy perspective only, should we be saying that at least 2 isn't enough? Are we saying, and of course in a small building, you know, what are we saying is the lowest level that we will accept from the policy perspective?
Per building or just?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I don't know if we can say that.
sure we can.
I think those are great questions for Deb to take back to the
Right.
group that works in guidelines, you know, hearing that we want to make sure that those guidelines set standards for training and access and issues like the bus. Maybe not the best equivalent example, but the one that comes to mind to me was the decision to add AED units in buildings for
Yeah.
defib. And I remember the same conversation in a 3-story high school at the time, and it was about, well, what about the athletics and the fear, this floor, that floor, this part of the building, and access and time. And so, you know, I think the politicians gave us a minimum set of standards to meet some pressure point. We have our own internal feelings about maybe going beyond that, and what does that mean? So I think we can work that through the regulations. That may then lead to future updates to the policy. Let that committee kind of play with it and look at it. Because any number is going to be feel kind of, numbers by building is going to feel arbitrary. 5 for every building. Westerville Central is a whole lot of more square footage than Point View, even with the addition. So where do you put them? Who has them? Playground duties, athletics, games, right? I don't know, you know, where trainers are carrying them. And then there's also the issue of people's comfort level with doing it, which was part of what I think Deb was dealing with when she was bringing folks in, because those who have done it or watched it done, not all of us, even when we have a biology degree, do really well with blood, and that's why we become maybe teachers. But, you know, those kinds of expectations and then the amount of training, understanding it takes people to get to. I think you can get them there because our staff is interested in school safety, but it takes a lot to think about taking one of those things and doing what you got. Yeah. So, yeah, we can continue. I think what I hear is when we go back to developing guidelines, let's not restrict ourselves to the minimum standards set by law in our policy, but a set of standards that we think means we're balancing fiscal responsibility against student safety with an edge to student safety. And it's not just student safety.
Adults
It's anybody in the building safety.
Well, and I think, President Davidson, you asked much more eloquently, much more precisely based on experience where I was going, which is, I do think that in addition to this, maybe unique amongst policies that we review, we have to have a bit of a peek into the administrative management of the program, right? The strategic statement that we're asked to vote on is ratifying that we are taking advantage of the legislature's new law saying we can do this as a district. I think we need to understand a little bit more of the mechanics underneath that, as opposed to just approving the policy itself in order to get a level of comfort that we're going to be able to meet the needs of our students. And like I said, it might be unique amongst most of our policy discussions that we need to see a little bit more administratively to know exactly what we're dealing with.
Do you know any school districts that have adopted this and how they do it?
I believe Columbus went in this direction.
Okay,
I believe Olentangy has gone in this direction. I'd be happy to do a informal survey of the area districts to find out who definitely has gone forward with this and get a copy of their administrative guidelines on how they've chosen to implement the policy for us to consider. And did I mention, as you know, there's 2 different dosage for the size of the individual, so that complicates the situation even a little bit more.
so it's 60 pounds, but it's better to give too much than not enough. But again, you know, if a kid has a heart problem, or, I mean, there's, I know this is, I'm preaching to the choir here, but there's a lot that goes with this.
When we're developing the administrative guidelines, is it possible for us to lean on medical professionals beyond, our school nurses are great, but are there other professionals we could lean on that give us maybe some direction too about what the best guidelines will be?
We actually will need to have a prescriber, a physician, work with us in this area, so that will become our person.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. 12.02, first reading for policy 6835, audit committee, and my guess is
That's me.
Bart?
Yep. Again, this was first reading. All we're asking, we've stricken out the language which says we'll appoint the audit committee members of the board resolutions. We'd stricken out the words at its annual meeting, which we typically do in January, and it would read instead prior to October 31st each year. So that's just a recommendation. You know, we could do it now, or we could do it September 31st or October. It just gives us some leeway to have a better understanding when the audit is and to fit people's schedules. So that's the only thing we did with this policy, was change, took out annual meeting and inserted prior to October 31st of each year. So,
Any questions for Bart? Okay, let's move on. 12.03, first reading of policy 7300, real estate and property, disposing of real estate and property, personal property. And Jeff LaRose is going to speak with us about this.
Members of the board, this policy is being revised to reflect changes in the law. Specifically, it states that real property over $10,000 used for school operations that has not been used in that capacity for 2 years shall be offered for lease or sale. The current policy states that said property shall first be offered to any startup community school within the district. An example being Horizon Science Academy on Morse Road. What has been added is the board shall also offer the property to any college prep boarding school located within the district, and we're not aware of any currently. And to comply with how funds from the sale of real property may be used, we have added language stating that the proceeds shall be used to retire any debt with respect to that property, and any excess revenue shall be used to pay for capital expenses related to instructional technology.
Any questions?
Yeah.
I just find it interesting, the language is conditioned to college preparatory boarding schools. The number of those in the state is pretty small, but I'm glad the legislature went out and, made that clarification.
Property, personal property. Okay.
We have always talked about the necessity of offering to a community school located within the district. This doesn't say that. It doesn't say within the district, does it?
I believe it does.
Does it? I may have read over it too quickly. Where is it? I'm way down at the bottom, because I had a question about way down at the bottom, too. Sold to a community school or the Board of Trustees of a college preparatory boarding school as set forth. Now, as set forth in, the revised code may say within the district, but our policy does not say within the district.
Is that what C says? Yes. Because I could be missing.
No, you're probably right. I just think that if it says it in one spot, it should say it
Oh, okay, gotcha,
in the other.
gotcha,
So
gotcha.
I would like to see it in A, and
Gotcha.
I'm on bits and phrases
Yeah,
tonight
yeah,
of
no,
policies.
all right.
The question that I have is the proceeds piece at the bottom. Why are we limiting ourselves so specifically to that?
That's per House Bill 59. I'm actually
Okay,
researching that with Bricker Knuckler, so if there are changes, I will bring that at the second reading.
okay. I just don't like us to tie our hands so tightly.
Understand?
I realize the legislature doesn't really have a problem with tying our hands so tightly, but I don't like for us to do it.
It used to be, I'm not sure, I've talked to Jeff about this, but it used to be if you sold property or whatever, it always went back into the fund that purchased it. That's sort of been the guideline in the past. If the permanent improvement bought it and you sold it, it goes back in the permanent improvement fund. This is the first I've seen anything that requires you to pay debt instead.
Pay debt, buy educational technology.
Right.
It seems to me those should be local decisions.
We have a lot of those,
I
don't
know
we?
how silly.
You're losing.
I know.
You're investigating that.
Yes,
Thank you, Jeff.
you're welcome.
Appreciate it. Okay, 12.04, first reading of policy 8325, receiving legal documents. Will that be, who's going to, oh, Mr. Hershiser, welcome.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg. For years, we've had practices for receiving legal documents and how we handle those documents. Through our review with Neola, they have recommended the policy you have before you, so that we currently don't have a policy on that process. So this kind of formalizes how we currently do business.
Nancy?
No, this one just seems like a duh to me.
Anybody else? We're good? Question? You're good? Thank you, Mark. Okay, 12.05, first reading policy 8510, wellness, and I bet Mrs. Meisner will join us again.
She's back.
Good evening, President Davidson, members of the board. I'm presenting for your consideration revisions to policy 8510 wellness. The revisions are being recommended in order to align the language in policy 8510 with the requirements of House Bill 143 in regards to concussions and head injuries. Westerville Schools is taking the necessary steps to ensure district personnel are knowledgeable of signs of concussion and that staff are knowledgeable of the appropriate recovery safeguards needed in order to allow for the brain to recover from concussion. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
I'm being picky again. Under C, with regard to other school-based activities, the district shall, the school shall, the school shall, the school shall. We just need to, with regard to other school activities, because then we say the school shall. So we just need to clean up that language a little bit. And then I'm just going to lodge a philosophical comment. some of our policies describe parameters, and we lay out the requirements in guidelines. This is one of those that describes parameters and then also includes guidelines. So there's nothing for you to do about it. I'm just registering a complaint overall that we need to be as clean as we can be, and sometimes you can't be because of law. What's parameter? What's guideline? Which one is in which document? So I'm just being picky tonight.
Understood.
I guess the question that I have, and I'm not sure if maybe Scott's got a position on this as well, but whether or not this language has been federated in any athletic concussion awareness as well, beyond physical education.
Actually, we were able to get that language taken care of in the appropriate policies. This is a catch-up now, making sure that this particular policy also has the needed language. The board previously, year and a half ago or so, did update policy language in the 2000 section relative to this point.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're cruising right along. 13.01, may I have a motion for donations?
Second.
We are so very grateful for all of these donations. Anybody else?
It just can't be said, be said too often, how much we really appreciate the community, individuals, businesses. I mean, I know we all say this every time, but believe me, we do not take any of this, the biggest to the smallest, for granted. This is huge. Thank you.
It is huge. And so often, the donations include donations from citizens in the district to help students who need lunch money. And that's something that you never used to see in this particular district. And I was looking at some information today. This is tangential, but you'll understand why I'm saying it. In the lifespan of a generation of students, so in other words, from kindergarten to 12th grade, in this most recent generation of students, poverty, children who are identified as economically disadvantaged in Westerville City Schools has increased 173% across that 13-year span. And we see that in the donations, and while that suggests significant stressors on a lot of our families, it also then points out very clearly the way that people within the community step forward to do whatever they can do to help families. And I appreciate that so very much.
Go ahead.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Dr. French,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. 13.02, I need a motion to approve summer student candidates for graduation from Westerville Central, North, South schools who have completed all local and state requirements.
So moved.
Yay.
Everybody went through this one,
Yay.
yes?
Second?
The one you
Which
didn't
one?
write down.
Second.
And they'll be here next board meeting for summer graduation, correct? Is it next board meeting, Scott? Next board meeting, we'll be doing summer graduation. Always a good time.
Awesome,
I
congratulations.
love that. That's so cool. I was a summer graduate, and I'm always really proud of people who choose to step outside of the bounds a little bit. For whatever reason, they chose to do so. I chose to do so I could leave and go to college earlier. But for people who choose that pathway, it shows a different approach to school and life, and I'm always just really tickled with summer grads.
I too was a summer graduate
Yes, I knew I liked you.
because I fell behind in a class and I needed to take,
I was gonna say.
I needed to take a class because college was waiting for me. Can we please edit that out of,
Nope, too late, Rick.
Send that to the Velardo boys.
no, please don't tell my boys.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Dr. French,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. 13.03, may I have a motion to approve the resolution for the FY16 bus routes.
So moved.
Second.
Sorry.
Go.
What?
Second. Yeah.
Yes.
Does anyone want to? Mr. Wines?
Take the floor, Chris. Floor, ceiling, walls, whatever else you need.
Okay. I haven't had my sugar for tonight, so. Good evening, Madam President and members of the board. Ohio Administrative Code 3301-83-13 requires annual district approval of all bus stops and time schedules within the first 10 days of beginning of the school term. A few things that I wanted to point out: that Westerville service perimeters continue to exceed the state minimums requirements. Actually, looking at last year, our maintenance cost per mile was still 26% below the state average, while still operating, exceeding the state minimum requirements. Last year, for fiscal year 15, we ended the school year with 89 bus routes, 32 that serviced 32 locations, which included 22 public schools, 6 private schools, and 4 career centers. To begin this school year, the fiscal year 16, we also have 89 routes again that now service 33 total locations, 23 public schools with the reopening of the Longfellow for the all-day kindergarten program, and 6 private schools and 4 career centers. All routing, including bus stop information, was made available to the district's website on August 4th. And then we are currently transporting 9,500 students that we have assigned to our buses. And tonight we are recommending to the board that we approve the designated bus routes and bus stop locations for the fiscal year 16 school year.
How many students did you say?
9,500.
Thank you.
We don't have any, just a question on the bus stops. How many bus stops did you say?
How many bus stops do we have?
Maybe you
Good
didn't say.
question. I don't know. But
Okay.
I can tell you, I mean, we do the 23 different
That's all right.
schools, but
That's all right. I just hope that it's not in front of my driveway again. That happened last year. The bus stopped in the middle of the road on Mount Royal, and I'm sure you heard about it.
oh, I don't know what to talk about really.
Okay, we can talk about that later. Thank you.
You're correct. There is not a bus stop there in front of you
Thank you.
anymore. There's 4 bus stops there now. So
Oh.
I'm kidding.
Did you hear what he said?
No, I didn't hear it. I'm sorry.
He's,
No longer one bus stop there. There's 4.
Yeah, well, this one stops right now. I mean, no lights or anything, and the people didn't know what to stop or not. It was the strangest. It was for one student. Every day? Every day, until I reported it. It's something strange, and we need to talk,
okay.
okay?
Are you going to stay to the end, Chris?
I will.
Okay, we would love to have you.
Thank you.
Bart?
Dr. French,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. Thank you so much. Are you going to stay up there, or are you going to, Chris? Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, 13.04. I need a motion to approve a resolution declaring impracticality of transportation.
So moved.
Second.
And Becky's going to join us and talk to us about that.
Yes. Good evening, Madam President and members of the board. Before you is a resolution declaring practicality for transportation. The Offices of Purchasing and Logistic has evaluated this private school student per the requirements of the Ohio Revised Code and declared the student impractical to transport. Approving this resolution will allow the district to offer payment in lieu of a transportation, which this amount is set by the state. It's a recommendation for the board to approve this resolution.
Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Becky.
You're
Barb?
welcome. Thank you.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Dr. French,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. Okay, 14.01 takes us to public comments, and we have one. Peg Duffy.
I have to use a script tonight because I have a lot to say, and I'm quoting some people. I want to talk about win-win. Win-win comes up for renewal next year, but now is the time to open discussion on possible changes. I by no means advocate that we slough off nearly a third of our student population. Remember, transfer is possible only when initiated through a petition request to State Board of Education by the Columbus District. Only they can do that. But we need to reevaluate and ask some tough questions. In a 1998 email from a then sitting board member, still active in school matters, quote, "I cannot imagine Columbus schools making a play for the developed areas included in the agreement. I think Westerville should recognize that and negotiate hard. The agreement may have made sense 6 or 12 years ago, but not today," unquote. Now, that was 1998 that this board member said that. Our current territory has not always been Westerville School District, even though the students may have attended here. The district has evolved over many years as the county board addressed enrollment changes in the 6 area rural districts. With the population of growth in the 50s came municipal annexation so that they could provide water and sewer service. Thus, we have areas that are City of Columbus, Westerville School District. If you go to the district website, 150 Years History Book, you can get some details. I've just pulled out things that I thought were good, would help to summary. How things evolved. In 1826, Blendon Township trustees established 6 districts, each expected to provide a school for its children in grades 1 through 8. Westerville was one of those. Westerville exempted village by mid-1850s accepted high school students on a tuition basis from the Blendon Township rural districts. All of these districts, including Westerville, were under the jurisdiction of the Franklin County Board of Education. In 1937, the County Board of Education recommended that Blendon District become part of Westerville exempted village, with a provision for Blendon to retain a school. As late as the 1940s, back and forth land transfers between Blendon and Mifflin occurred several times. When Blendon Local finally became part of Westerville exempted village, our southern boundaries were extended as we know them today. In 1955, Westerville refused to accept any tuition students, grades 1 through 8, from the overcrowded Blendon Central College building. In addition, Westerville offered no assurance that there would continue to be space for high school tuition students. Hence, the Central College District petitioned to become part of Westerville School District. I ask that this board, not the one that will be in place come January 2016, open discussion on topics such as the possibility noted by legal counsel following renewal 6 years ago. And I will be quoting from a document that appears on the district website under win-win analysis. Quote, some of this is kind of legalese, doesn't make a lot of sense, but let's quote the guys. "It may be that the parties could set up and agree to a termination procedure that was set forth in an existing agreement, since that agreement was approved by all parties, without requiring the specific approval of all the parties at the time of termination. This seems to imply that the agreement and changes could be worked out between the 2 affected districts without involving State Board of Education," unquote. To reiterate what that board member said in 1998, Westerville should negotiate hard. The agreement may have made sense years ago, but not today. Please open the dialogue now.
Sorry, turn this on. Thank you, Peg. Moving on, 15.01, board comments. And who would like to go first?
I simply am going to thank Mrs. Duffy for speaking regarding win-win, and I agree that we need to be to look into this and be talking about it and getting some information, and I appreciate her comments, and think we need to be at least thinking about it. Thank you.
It's always important to look at any agreement that comes up for renewal or reapproval. Win-win is actually fairly complex. There are a number of details in it that sometimes boggle the mind, but that is why sometimes in years past when it has come up for its reapproval, we have had legal representatives come and explain the various complexities of the agreement in public so that people had a better understanding of it. I do remember the email that you're talking about and the comments from 1998 vaguely, but I would never want us to rely on comments that were made in general about a very, very complex agreement. I do know also that each time win-win does come up, there is significant discussion about it, both within this district and within all of the participating districts. I will say right now, based on what I know of win-win, based on the years I've spent looking at win-win, based on the years I've spent talking to people who live within the areas of win-win and the potential areas of win-win, I would not ever want to be put on record as saying that I want to remove any portion of this district or any group of students from this district. I know that win-win is a contentious piece of agreement. You can call it a piece of whatever you like to call it. I'm calling it a piece of an agreement. It's highly contentious with people. Many people do not fully understand it. Many people view it as a different type of agreement than it is, and many people use it to justify their own particular biases about the district. And I'm not going to play that game. I will look at the agreement because it's always worth looking at it. It's important to look at it. It's important to look at ways that we can protect our boundaries and that we can protect our students and we can protect our facilities and we can protect our money. It's important to do that, and we will do that. But in no way do I want anyone to think that I am in favor in any way, shape, or form of removing portions of the students from the district. No, but she did not say that. Mrs. Duffy did not say that. But what happens as soon as win-win begins to be discussed is that's what people begin to say. And I don't want it said that we said that I said that, or that Mrs. Duffy said that. In fact, you specifically said something completely opposite. Right. But rumors start very rapidly, and the best way to stop a rumor is to say very clearly what you believe.
Different subject. I won't tackle win-win. I've done enough reading to make my head swim to try and get through all the points of the agreement. But I did want to give a bit of an update that will be preemptive of something that's going to be coming before the board, something that I'm very excited about because we've spent a lot of time working with our city colleagues and believe that we're closing in on a proposal that will finally resolve a missing sign at Westerville South. I want to make sure that there's a little bit of background for the community. I have kept the principal up to date in kind of the process that we've had to go through. This is going to sound a little bit odd, but when we originally started conversations with the city around replacing the sign, and was including in that conversation a discussion about improving and upgrading the sign at Westerville North, so do both signs, so that we have a standard of signage across our high schools. We ran into a situation where there was a fairly obscure Supreme Court case that was before the justices, that was in relation to a city and a municipality's capabilities to determine whether or not they could dictate signage type. And was the type of sign also protected under free speech? Won't dive into the details other than to say that we waited with an agreement with the city to see what the outcome from that case would be. As we got to the June time period where all the announcements were coming out, I know for certain that nobody amongst all the announcements that came out in the Supreme Court saw anything about the particular decision about digital signs, right? That's how obscure the case was. However, it did come out in a way that has put us in a position to put forward a signage package request to the city that's being worked on right now. It will resolve our issue at Westerville South. I'm very excited about that. I've made promises to the community for a long time that we would get that signage piece taken care of. It's in flight. We're going to hear about it at the board, at a future board meeting, and we're also going to be submitting to the city. So it's, unfortunately, it's one of the few things that we've had to hold up on until the Supreme Court weighed in. So, but I'm looking forward to getting it resolved.
Thank you, Richard.
Go ahead.
So we were waiting for SCOTUS to kind of do their deal, and
Believe it or not.
it's awesome. Just really two quick things, unless I think of several other things. Two quick things. I don't know if you noticed, but I noticed that when we were talking about EpiPens and children's health, everyone up here got just kind of very seriously and almost quiet and reflective. And I just thought that that was an indication of how much I know everyone on the board, and I never speak for everyone on the board, except for now, how much everyone on the board really cares about the kids. And we'll figure that out. So thank you for your, and the whole team's work on it. We'll figure that one out. Like the unsung heroes of the transportation department. Thank you all for, there's this sign that goes up every year over State Street. Thank you, bus drivers, the precious cargo, that's right, this sign that goes up there, and there is something really important about that. And I hope you all in the transportation department, way over there on the side in that building, I hope you don't lose sight of the fact that we don't lose sight of that fact, that what you do has a great deal of value. And Peg, really, I appreciate you bringing up the win-win piece. That's I've read enough to make my head swim too, but still, I don't get it all. And I would stand with anyone, and the both of you are standing on the same stake in the ground. We're not interested in pushing anyone anywhere. We just like value, back to the valuing of the kids again. So that's, I don't know if I've slipped into sermonic mode. I'm just suggesting that that this board is pretty passionate about the people in this district, and I hope that that can be conveyed in the best ways we know how.
Thanks, Rick. So I have two things, and I'm glad Chris and Becky have stayed because I wanted to give you guys also a shout out. The First Time Riders program at Whittier was phenomenal. I know it was nice weather, but I really think all those buses out there, the popsicles, showing the kids how they can take tires on and off and exploring and taking bus rides. And the parents were smiling, the kids were smiling. You guys go above and beyond. And our community loves it, and we love it, and we appreciate it, and we appreciate you and all the extra and all the bus drivers that were out there. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Really, really nice. Next, I just want to wish our students and our staff a wonderful year. I know it's going to be amazing. And that's it. So, dates, times, and locations. We will meet here in regular session August 24th and Monday, September 14th at 6 p.m. at the Early Learning Center. And then I'm not going to ask for a motion, Bart. Ready? We adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
I can't figure out how come he let you get away with it.